Thank you to Matt and Agnes and the whole Paseo team for the opportunity to meet some of the artists in the festival and be able to actually spend time and get to know them and ask questions that selfishly I have, but maybe other people have too. So thank you for that. And thanks for creating the Paseo. It's incredible for Taos. So Zoe and David and I have just met. We've just been introduced to each other. So I kind of love that we get to have this process of getting to know each other sort of publicly, which is interesting and fun. And I do have very specific questions, but they've also brought a set of images, and so we'll just kind of have it be an organic conversation. Things come up. So we'll talk for a little while and then open it up to questions. So be thinking about what questions you might have for them that I probably won't be able to cover. So first, I'll just ask each one of you to introduce yourselves, give a little background about maybe where you came from. Zoe, I know you grew up in Taos, you just told me. So just a little information about yourselves personally, and then if one or both of you want to tell us how you guys met and began collaborating, and just for the purpose of DossHaus.
Sure. Well, my name is Zoe Taylor, and I am a Taos kid. I grew up in Taos. And I was a homeschooler, so I spent a lot of my days after finishing my schoolwork. I would spend time with artists in Taos and going to galleries. My parents were always very encouraging of getting out and seeing how artists worked. Mm-hmm. And I was somewhat obsessed by the way the artists lived. I remember going to Sid's Market, and I would see an artist that I knew they had a gallery opening. Yeah. And I go, what are they buying? They're walking That's differently.
Why?
How do they live like this? Cool. And so it's no real surprise that I wanted to become that. That's something remarkable that this a kind of person could live just a little differently from the rest of society.
Because your parents weren't artists. No one in your family was an artist. Okay.
I always loved working with my hands, mm-hmm. and I was fortunate to be able to work with Taos artists as well. And I mean, I'd be pulled aside and showed that this is clay, this is how clay works, or this is lino cutting, this is how you do this, these are pencils. Right. And I learned a lot from those from my days in Taos. So cool. I'm very proud to come from Taos.
That's great.
I'm glad
great.
to be here.
Totally.
And my name is David Connolly, and I grew up in a rural town in California. And I left the second I could and moved to New York. I went to school at NYU for film and photography, mm-hmm. and then I ended up moving back to Los Angeles, where Zoe and I had the great fortune to become acquainted. And I remember we were in a room of people, and Zoe made a very obscure reference to a French TV movie from 1968, and my ears perked up, and I looked across the room, and she was shocked that anybody in the room would have ever got that reference.
That's sweet.
And so I guess there was a creative spark right there, and from that point on, I think we just knew we could work together. And so we started first by just kind of experimenting with videos and painting. We used to do a thing where we call it playing jazz, where we would drive out to a location with a camera and just pass it back and forth. And whatever happened sort of happened. And then we would take the material back and we would cut it into little short videos and films and things like that, and just see what happened. And what would you say, about 3 years ago, we started getting involved in cardboard, and I could pass that back over to Zoe to explain that.
Awesome.
So where cardboard came into the picture. We were just working on some project, and I wanted to paint. And I didn't have any canvases. Mm-hmm. That's the big problem. And I was out in the alley, and there was cardboard, and that is the cheapest, most immediate canvas you could find. And it was the first time I ever painted on cardboard, mm-hmm. and it just was sort of always around then. It was like, oh, well, there's a box. We should bring it in. We're going to use this for something. And then we worked on a stop motion animation with paper dolls. And they were hinged paper dolls. And I'm not sure if it was which one of us had the aha moment of, wouldn't it be amazing if we could live in this paper world where anything is possible and nothing, you could do anything, you could make anything, and we sort of shrugged it off. And on one of our New Year's cards, we made paper clothes. They were very crude. That's how that was the first time we worked with paper tangibly. Okay. And very just rapidly, we just wanted to apply paper and cardboard to everything we were doing, and started working in sculpture. And, it happened quickly and without question.
That's so good. Quickly and without question. That sounds like success for sure. And so you sort of gave yourselves this name as a creative duo. Can you tell me a little bit about the name?
Yeah, the name DossHaus, it's actually a British word. It's DossHouse, and it means flop house. And the reason why we became DossHaus was because when we started working in Los Angeles, it was actually cheaper to rent a flophouse apartment than it was studio space. So we rented a really cheap apartment with the intention of completely destroying it for all of our creative needs. And so we would say, you want to meet at the DossHaus at 11? Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll go to the DossHaus. And so slowly we started just referring to it as DossHaus. Everything we did was DossHaus. But then we didn't really want that. We like to play with language as well, and we didn't really want something to be directly linked to British culture, which we don't come from. Right. So we just had fun and polyglotted it and made it DossHaus with the Germanic ending.
That's great. Well, I want to talk to you both about your aesthetics. So maybe we can show some images while we talk about this. And so I love their statements. So often I read artist statements and they're long and obtuse and sometimes don't really say anything. Other times I come across an artist statement that is so concise and beautiful that I have to write it down, and this is theirs, and I'll share it with you. Very simple. Our inspiration is simple. We are building the world in which we wish to live, which you just touched on a little bit. And as concise and short as that is, I think in knowing that is sort of your proclamation, and then seeing the images of what it is that you actually create and the spaces that you insert yourself, and then how you take the objects that you make and bring them into the world in different ways, I think is really powerful. And so I'm wondering if either or both of you can just talk us through those aesthetic choices. And by that I mean like specifically the black, white, and gray, the references to stop animation, to French film. There's a little bit of surrealism there. And not everybody is gonna pick up on sort of the art historical references, but I think there is something about your work that is sort of generally familiar in a way, at least maybe not for super young kids, but as we were talking about the children that interacted with the phone booth last night, there still is a curiosity about that look, about what it is that you make. So can you just tell us a little bit more about how you come to those kind of decisions?
Does your mic work?
Yeah, is it okay? So I think the stop motion animation that we made was really the beginning of it, and when we did end up going into this paper world where everything that you see here is made out of, in the case of the clothing, it's all pressed paper, the same sort of stuff that you would make a hospital gown out of. Zoe's Dali-inspired headdress there is all cardboard. My tie is cardboard. And what we started doing is building these installations in which everything, the walls, the floors, everything is made out of recycled cardboard. And each individual piece is a three-dimensional cardboard sculpture. And the idea of it was we would invite the viewer to step into what feels like a two-dimensional illustration in a three-dimensional space. And so it sort of is disruptive of reality in that way. And what we do is we decide we're going to build an object, and in this case, maybe the typewriter, or the book of stories, or even the pen. And so we make each individual object as its own sculpture. And then we gather those sculptures into what becomes the installation. And then we do a third art form out of the piece where we then photograph what we call the perfect moment inside the installation. And stylistically, what would you say, Zoe? Oh, there's her shoes. Sorry. Yes, there they are.
So adorable.
Both of us are multidisciplinary. We like to paint, we like to sculpt, we like to photo, we like to make video, we like fashion, and so this gives us the ability to sort of scratch every one of those itches all at once. Anything you want to add to that, Zoe?
That was beautiful.
And when you're making these installations, are you thinking about photography? How they will exist in photography?
Not immediately. I mean, I can only express this from a very, very personal place where when I step into one of our completed installations, there's an emotion there. There's a singular feeling. And a photo is the closest you can get to capturing that moment, that feeling, and sharing it, that expression. So
yeah, I would say that each piece begins individually as sculpture, and it needs to live and breathe as a sculpture. And then, we don't always know what's going to end up in the final installation. It just sort of, we place it until it feels right. Sometimes we build something that we think is going to be in the installation that doesn't end up being in it because it doesn't feel right. And then it's really about just finding that moment to photograph the installation.
And those moments, are they based on a specific narrative that you're thinking of? Is there a story in your head when you're placing those objects?
We like to let the viewer bring the narrative. For us, I would say probably individually, we probably have our own narrative of what's happening. We don't really discuss that. But
really, you guys don't have conversations about why is there an airplane in the room? Or what? I mean, it doesn't, I'm curious about how you work together to create those things if it's not built on a specific storyline.
I think you would be surprised at how little we speak.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
And actually, there's a story that I'll tell later when we get to the photo, and there's a reason why we don't worry about not speaking too much.
Okay.
But yes, I think I honestly don't recall whose crazy idea it was to say let's build an airplane today, but we decided to build an airplane, and then a couple of weeks later we had a single-seat aircraft.
So great.
So in this case, film is also something that we very much draw from. We like film from all cultures and all around the world, hence the Russian Man with the Movie Camera poster, which is also a three-dimensional sculpture. So there it is close.
That's so great.
And there's the detail from the side. And again, the idea is it looks flat until you actually interface with it directly and you realize it's a three-dimensional object.
And can you, as you're going through some of these images, you were saying before we started something about the lighting that you guys choose, which I think is pretty interesting. I wish I would have sort of picked up on this as a curator, but I didn't, which I think is really a great successful part of the work too, is that the lighting, it's not an overly dramatic, set lighting, that you're using natural light. And can you talk a little bit about how you guys came to that decision where you are shooting in color, you're able to see skin tone against the black and white, but then the natural lighting as well?
Yeah, it's the idea is that we want to disrupt the sense of reality in the viewer.
Sure.
And the way that we are going to do that is, in the case of the photography, is we shoot in color, so skin tone becomes apparent, because that's the only thing that is going to break the illusion of that this is just a black and white, or it's two-dimensional, or it's a drawing. And so, and we also only use bounced natural light when at all possible. There has been a couple of times when we've needed direct spot lighting. There's a case where we built a diving bell, and being under the water, Zoe in the diving bell needed a little spotlight on her face, and we couldn't use natural light to light the rest of the scene. But in this case, we only use bounced natural light because, again, we feel like there's a warmth and a glow that comes from natural light that even in the best replication of it in tungsten lighting is not going to really capture.
Right, right.
And that's just a detail on our fish. And some cake.
So,
Lots of fiber.
0 calories, lots of fiber.
so
And yeah, you were talking earlier a little bit about influences, and so obviously a careful viewer can look and they can see Diane Arbus and Andy Warhol and Man Ray in this, as well as our own installation.
And Zoe was telling me a little bit about, that's so great, about the process of sculpting these objects. And I said, do you have a sculpture background? And she said, no. Do you have a sort of art making background? I don't remember if you said that.
I studied film and photography in
Okay.
school, but everything else is also self-taught.
Yeah.
There's a lot of experimentation, and that is something that cardboard allows you. You can mess up and completely destroy sheets and sheets and sheets of cardboard, but since it just came from the back alley, you don't feel like you're wasting material.
There's always more.
Yes.
Right, right. I mean, it's such an incredible object to see, and to know that you both have come to this point where you can think, in the round, like you were saying, and create an object that is so specific at one time, and then, it also is this, I don't want to say generic, but timeless in another way. And we were talking about the phone booth project that they have here at the Paseo. And now looking at that camera, I'm realizing it's kind of similar in that I think about kids interacting with both of them, and how the phone and the phone booth, is becoming more of an ancient object. And I don't know how much access kids have to an actual camera, whether it's manual or digital, that looks like a manual camera today, and that kind of experience generationally is interesting to me too, because I was seeing the adults and the kids interacting with that phone booth at the same time and having very different yet similar experiences, in that they wanted to participate and see what this object was. One might have had a nostalgic reference, and the other, it's brand new, which I just love. And I'm curious if, when you're making objects, if you think about those different experiences, or if you're just going with, like you were saying, what feels right, without a specific narrative.
Well, I mean, just looking at the watches here, making an object that is wound, or that you don't plug it into the wall and then it works. It does. I mean, you're able to create gears, and it's more. I mean, I'm attracted to the aesthetic of something that is not completely digital.
Right.
And I think that is, you can't really go to Target and very little is wound anymore.
Sure.
So I think that is just something that we're attracted to.
Yeah, and I think there is something to showing people what we were capable of doing before machines did everything for us as well. You could play music on that.
And I love on their website, I don't know if you've looked at their website, but they have a little, I don't know if you call it playlists. Yeah. I can't remember. And I, at my job, at a day job all day, I'm listening to these online streaming playlists, just blah, 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 digital stuff. And I was looking at their website, and, they have this cardboard record player that is spinning, and it moves, and then it's playing, David Bowie or something, which I just love. So I listened to that pretty much all day one day, which was wonderful. I loved it. It was really great, because it's really fun.
We did cheat a little bit. On our materials here, there is an electric motor in it, but everything else is cardboard painting.
That's so great.
And a little nod to Picasso in the background.
Definitely.
And another part of what we like to do is fashion. And so this was our 18th century composer, complete with wig.
Oh my God.
And Zoe the Matador. But note, she doesn't have a sword, she has a paintbrush.
Oh, I love it.
And music, another big part of our life. So this is a 2-scale Gretsch guitar. And some detail there. And then this was a shot from our recent gallery show at Gregorio Escalante Gallery in LA. And we decided to have a whole garage band set up. So again, that's a scale Thunderbird bass, a scale Gretsch drum set, and the Gretsch guitar. And this is our cardboard car.
This car is so amazing. I love this so much.
It's a scale 1960s Austin Mini. Everything down to the wheelbase and the speedometer. Everything in it is correct, except for the fact that it's made out of paper.
It's actually a greener car than Tesla.
And can you talk a little bit about the different locations that you put your work, whether it's in a gallery, in more site-specific installations and public spaces? Tell us how you make those decisions.
Yeah, for us, actually, we like both. And we love to be in galleries, but we also love to show art publicly. And the way that this piece or any piece plays inside a gallery versus outside is completely different. Generally speaking, when you're in a gallery, people are walking in knowing how to interface with art. They do it all the time. They have a history. They've been to museums. They've been to galleries. They're just looking at art the way that every gallery visitor does. They know that it's going to be against that white wall. But when we take something like this car and we drop it outside in the public, it's a chance to engage people who don't always have access to art or don't like the experience of going into a gallery or feel threatened by art in a gallery. And so for us, it creates that, it gives us a chance to let other people interface with art directly.
And you also make these wearable artworks. This is my roach brooch that they make, which I love so much. Living in Albuquerque, it feels very close to my heart to have a roach on my chest. It's all cardboard. I know, it's really great. I saw it and I couldn't help myself. So can you talk a little bit about that too, the fashion aspect? And they each have a little wearable as well.
I have a bee in my bonnet.
In her bonnet.
And there's a fly on my lapel. If I was wearing a tie, I could have rhymed and said there was a fly
On my tie. But when you are making the fashion pieces, do you get requests like to make clothes for people? How far into the fashion world do you guys go?
We usually just find a look or a certain, like with the Matador outfit, I just really wanted to make that. I really wanted to have a little bit of statement in there. So I just, it didn't really come from a request. It just, I just really wanted to be a Matador with a paintbrush. It's fairly simple.
And no one has
great.
requested us to make anything, but that's because they're not really functional.
Right.
No.
And they're very uncomfortable. So
yeah.
They look great, but they are not comfortable.
The photo of me and I look somewhat pained. So they're pretty stiff.
There is actually, this reminded me of the story that I wanted to tell you earlier. The image of this car, and the reason why Zoe and I don't question the fact that we don't communicate for long stretches when we're working on a piece. When we were working on this car, I was working on a piece of the back quarter panel for what would be the passenger side of this car. And as I was cutting it, Zoe was 10 feet away from me working on another piece. I made a design modification that I thought made the car look better. I forgot to tell Zoe that. And after about 5 hours of working on this piece, we decided to join our pieces because I realized she was working on the other side. And so I had this moment of, oh, I just ruined everything because I forgot to tell her and she's been working on this. But I didn't realize that she was having the same problem because she had made a design modification on the other side
I was
that she liked.
equally panicked.
And we brought the pieces together and they just fit perfectly.
You're kidding.
And both of us had this moment of shock, and we didn't even want to look at each other for a second. But once we did, and we realized that yes, the car looks better now, we had a conversation. We said we can never question, we don't have to worry about it.
That's pretty incredible. That's awesome.
So this was the telephone booth that was out at Paseo yesterday. We managed to grab a couple of photos.
Yeah, can you give us some more details about that, how that project came about, and how, if you submitted it for Paseo, or was it chosen? I'm not even sure.
Yeah, we applied for Paseo, and we actually hadn't built it yet, but
Okay.
we did send the concept and what we hoped would happen with it, and then we showed our images of our car as part of our
Awesome.
application as another example of our public art. And so yes, thankfully we were chosen, and we took it out and allowed
So great.
allowed people to step inside to a place where it's a ghost from the past. They're a private area in a public space, and we allowed people to go in and dial whoever they wanted.
Complete with phone book, you were saying? Or there's a
The
slot for
phone
the...
book was not there.
the
but
slot.
The slot was there and it opened up.
Yeah, there was quite a few kids that came up and asking what the black box was, and I said it holds the phone book. And they stared at me. What's a phone book?
I had no idea.
So there's a lot of mysterious items in there for.
And we had
I
fun
love
with designing the inside of this with the alphanumeric keypad. So we decided that instead of A, B, C, D, E, F, it would be fun if you could just direct dial and make combinations. So number 1 was mom, number 4 was men, and number 7 was sex.
So great. Whatever combination you wanted, huh?
Correct. Yes, and you could make the combinations because you had but and not. So
Right.
There are a few more popular buttons.
Mom is by far the most popular button.
That's great. Oh, I love it. And so when you two we were talking again before about how you, as the artist, sort of become performers when this phone booth or the other installations are in place, that you don't just want them to exist, sort of independently, that you really help activate that space. Can you talk about the roles that you guys play in that?
When we are in a public setting, generally we're only taking one object and setting it outside.
Okay.
And the reason is, if we have complete control over a room, we can populate the entire room, and then it's an immediate reaction when somebody walks into an installation and absolutely everything is monotone cardboard. But to do an exterior installation, we usually choose just one piece, an impact piece that can just disrupt the reality around it. And the idea there is, this is the living world, but somebody stepped in and just drew this object in. And when we are out in our cardboard and paper clothing, generally we kind of are the conduit for people that kind of invite them to interact in the space. So we're the medium, we're the midpoint.
Sure. And what is this piece?
This was a piece we did in Chinatown in LA. It was inspired by Charles and Ray Eames, two people who are very inspirational to Zoe and I. So I am wearing the cardboard bow tie for Charles, and she is wearing the Ray's famous dress. And behind you, us, is a complete, a large-scale version of their Do Nothing machine.
It does nothing.
It does nothing. It does even less than cardboard.
That's incredible.
And this was after our trip to Belgium. We went to James Enzer's house, and we felt the need to live in his world for a day.
It's so great.
And this is our surreal banquet table. I think that's all the photos we brought.
I love it. Oh, thank you guys. Awesome. Well, that's all my questions. Does anybody have specific questions for them? Yeah, go ahead.
Where are all those pieces now?
Good question.
Some of the pieces. The question was where are all the pieces? Some are in private collections. Some are on lend, and some are in the very surreal space of our studio. It's quite a scene.
Practical question. What would you have done if you hadn't been so fabulously photogenic?
Whoa.
I want to know what they would have done if they hadn't been so fabulously photogenic.
What would we have done if we weren't so photogenic? I think we would still be in our photos.
And you've never had other people in your photographs?
No, we consider this our world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No one else is allowed.
Well, maybe by invite only, but so far we're the only
So
members
far,
of the team.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, in the back.
This is a little off the subject, but what's happening to your movie?
Oh, what's happening
great
to
question.
our movie? This is
There's a film in the works, yes?
There
Yes.
is.
We, over the past couple of years, we've been working on an independent feature film. It's 93 minutes now. It's in fine cut. We just got the music from the composer, and we will have it finished hopefully by the end of the year. It's just very slow going because it's once again the two of us are doing every part of it. So
That's great.
Okay, so we'll get to see it someday?
hopefully very soon.
Great. Will you be doing screenings in LA?
Yeah.
Elsewhere? Yeah,
We'll
cool.
be looking for a distributor.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Another question?
Yeah, I have a friend who's a fashion editor for a London newspaper, and she just recently did sort of an insert magazine of the interface between art and fashion, and that's something that is now really sort of on the forefront of just what's happening in that symbiosis between those two worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that this work, there's a very, very interesting portal there that's opening up increasingly just in the last year or two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it's something to be explored. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. And we definitely agree. I mean, we see fashion as a very important art form, and you know, all art forms influence each other. Mm-hmm. So you know, I mean, we lost David Bowie this year, but there's a guy who influenced fashion and film and everything around him.
Definitely.
And you know, we love Alexander McQueen's work, hugely inspirational to us, and the surreal still lives in fashion, where frequently it falls out of other art forms. So you know, they keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to be delighted to pass your website on to some
Thank you very
of
much.
my friends
Thank you.
who are in that world.
Thank you.
Well, I have one last question for you guys. If you can talk a little bit about your experience at the Paseo as sort of the analog, the antithesis maybe of some of the other projects and the other investigations that are happening, at least in physical form. How's it been?
Well, this has been a really, really incredible experience, and you never really know what people's reaction will be to this piece, to what we create, and I mean, I'm at a lot. I'm tongue-tied. I mean, I prefer to express myself visually, but I'm going to pass that.
Yeah, I mean, our experience here has been phenomenal, and the fact that this is a festival only in its third year is mind blowing to us, and it's so well run, and Matt and Agnes have done such an amazing
Awesome.
job, and they're so great to the artists. I mean, we've always felt completely supported.
Cool.
We felt like we let the world down on Friday when we got rained out, but you know, cardboard in the rain
Right, it doesn't work.
last,
Right.
So we had to run away. But thankfully yesterday completely cooperated with us. And as far as being the antithesis, I don't know that we're an antithesis. I think, yes, that in the medium, sure. And what we do like to do is you know, we are very much about the handmade and the hand-drawn and you know, putting, but I think that the message of consumer culture and trash culture but also taking now I'm tongue-tied and you know, taking those things from the past that we no longer have, but reminding the world that they existed. You know, I think that it was a pretty symbiotic relationship between all the artists here at the Paseo.
Yeah, no, I think it was an amazing fit to have you guys here. Yeah. Oh, Matt, hold on. Can we go to Matt first and then Anita?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to chime in and just reflect on the sort of total curation and laying out the festival, and now I'm listening to the presentation and getting to see my mind exploring the past 2 days and getting to hear more about how you insert yourself within your work. And I couldn't help going into this idea of virtual reality. We have these virtual reality stations, and working with Paseo as sort of this idea of creating environments, you know, transforming spaces. And I was like, oh, like sometimes this stuff, it just kind of comes together, and like, of course, that's what we're doing. But
Totally.
I just was wondering if, I just loved seeing how that all comes together in a way very organically intuitive. I don't know what it is, but I just, you know, and I love hearing now that you're working on a film. So I'm curious what your thoughts on the realm of virtual reality and as you develop with your work and going into film and such like that has an interest. I'm just curious if you have any reflections on that as a technology where I know you're not going, but there's just some interesting overlaps there.
Well, yeah, and we do create our own virtual reality. We
Totally.
do that. We just do it in a completely analog, hand-cut, hand-painted way. But you know, we don't shy away from technology. We shoot digitally. We use computers. We use cell phones.
They're on Instagram.
Yes. It's just the medium that we choose happens to be something that it sort of draws from the past a little more, I suppose.
Yeah, interesting.
Zoe, anything?
Well, one of the things just really quickly that I loved seeing yesterday was, you know, I made a couple loops through all of the projects, and, you know, going over to the park where the virtual reality piece was, and the dome, and, you know, all these other projects, they had these long lines. You know, people were just like clamoring to get in, and it was the same with the phone booth. Like, you know, I was just kind of lurking on the sidewalk, and there are just, you know, hordes of people like wanting to open the door and like get into this other world, which is, it's sort of ingrained in us, I think, you know, no matter what material form it takes, the curiosity is the same, you know, and I love to see how different artists create those worlds. It's really great.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, the phone didn't even work.
Right. It didn't.
Actually, I mean, people would ask us if it worked, and I would say it works to the limit of your imagination. And that actually did bear fruit. I mean, some people. There were several conversations with God yesterday in our phone booth. There was a person who contacted his mother who is no longer with us and talked to him. And so, you know, it does work if you allow it to work.
That's really sweet. Anita, do you have a question?
It was actually more a comment. I'm just thinking about the place in works and virtual reality. And, you know, I was struck between the telephone box and the radio confessional.
Sure.
The two of those. And it made me think about your work as that continuum. You know, technology is the knowledge of technique made by hand. You know, it's a very, and kind of drawing that line. And I guess just wondering how much you consciously engage with the idea of play. Because that virtual reality, when you see children's drawings, they're constantly making their world. And nothing is impossible.
Mm.
And the children are the ones that had the very most conversations
Yeah.
yesterday, and we knew that going into it. The children were going to be the ones that actively engaged with it because their imagination is currently limitless. And but yeah, I think you touched on the aspect of whimsy, which is very obvious in our work, and that is something that we definitely are conscious of. The cardboard box itself, when you were a child and your parents got a new refrigerator, you had no other toy. And that cardboard box became, your castle or your spaceship or your fort or whatever you wanted it to be. And so we are consciously drawing on that idea that yes, it is anything you want it to be. And also you can take these objects, which it is post-consumer waste, and you can create something that's beautiful and has its own life with that.
I think Janet had a
Yeah.
Oh, I want to talk about the commerce of art. And you've got all these objects. You've got the object that seems very temporary, but I suppose, that would last a long time on somebody's, in someone's collection. Do you think of the installation, the whole installation as being the art piece, or the photograph that you keep and that you can sell and make multiples of? And
we actually see it as three equally important but separate art forms. So we do see this, like this camera, for example, is an individual sculpture, and we do sell that as an artwork. The installations are it's not a saleable art form, but it's a way of gathering all of our sculptures together and creating a living environment with them. But it's still an equally important art form to us. And the photo is sort of the final document of that installation having lived. But that is also, we take great care in the composition and the lighting of that photo because we also see that as a very important art form.
well, the one installation with the photography on the wall and the drums and the guitars in the foreground.
Oh, sure,
That
at the
was a
gallery.
traditional gallery show.
That was a
right?
traditional gallery show. Yeah.
Cool. I like that it can, it has a foot in so many worlds that it could be a saleable object. And I also love that it's cardboard, which is not the most archival, thing. I love that you're just like, I'm making it out of cardboard.
It is covered in several layers of acrylic paint and varnish.
Awesome.
So that will last. And if you go back, Toulouse-Lautrec painted on cardboard, and those are still in museums.
And
so.
the references are great because you have to have material in order to make your work, and that's the accessible material. And yeah, exactly. People were painting on cardboard and they're still holding up. So yeah, I love it. Love
Do those instruments play?
Actually,
like the
talk about
phone
the
booth?
drums.
Oh.
The drums do, actually.
Because I remember you were in the band yourself.
Oh dear.
This is the hometown.
Right.
I'm in my hometown now. But the bass and the Gretsch guitar, they're just paper strings. But the drums, just due to they're the exact same size and diameter as an actual drum kit. When you strike it, it has the same sound as a.
But we don't recommend you strike.
No, we do not. It is not recommended.
Well, thank you both for being here and talking us through your process. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming in with your great questions.